Well, welcome back to another session of 6th grade drawing unit. We're continuing to work on the car that we have been drawing for the last few sessions, and soon it will be time to clean up all of our grid lines off of our car, and then also to decorate it, and then at some point we have to begin coloring this project as well. And so quickly to review, this is the item, the car that we are attempting to draw, and we went through and edited some of the parts of it out because they were just either too complicated or difficult to draw, or it simply just didn't help the drawing in the case detail that really wouldn't help us much. And then we spent our time going through all the squares and dividing the squares so that we could accurately figure out where all of the markings on the paper went. And if you've been following along with the project on your 10-inch by 16-inch piece of paper drawing along with me, then you've probably been pretty successful so far drawing what you see in front of you. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to continue where we left off in the previous session, and it looks like we were able to finish our door and pretty much the silhouette, the outline of the car in profile, and that's a lot of progress in one session. So it seems to me that this detail here of the steering wheel is something that we need to draw first. And get that out of the way, and actually then very much of this portion of the car will be completed, and we can move on to other issues down here on these interior lines and these pieces of the suspension that are under the car as well. So in this case we can tell by having split the square earlier that, and I will do that again because I believe that's a good practice and it's easily erased if you draw lightly. So I'm splitting the square, but the only reason I'm doing that, I don't have to split it sideways, is so I can figure out where the end of that steering wheel goes. And in this case, if I split it, it looks to me that's where the steering wheel comes out at. And furthermore, where these lines cross right here, that's where the steering wheel ends. And those lines would be these two lines right here. So what we have to do basically is just draw a line, and we're going to make it look more like a broomstick. There is a indication on the other side of this steering wheel that makes it look somewhat three-dimensional, but I find it to be difficult for students to color in, and then it also is very awkward looking if it's not drawn properly. So we're simply just going to draw something like a broomstick, and we're going to start right here where our split line hits the top of the door, and we're going to just draw a diagonal line aiming at that corner. And now it's not going to hit directly in that corner because we have to round off that steering wheel a bit, and that's going to happen right there where that corner is. So the steering wheel has some level of thickness to it, but it does disappear behind this green stripe. So we're going to come down just a hair, and we're going to draw another similar line. So really what we've drawn here is just a stripe that just barely is below the corner and just barely is above the corner. So I'm going to bold that up right now. And I'm going to erase my layout work so that it's not interfering with my ability to show you what I want you to do. Okay, I have a little brush over here I use to dust things quite frequently with. Okay, so what we've got here is pretty much the side of our steering wheel, and we're simply going to just curve that around right there where it meets that intersection of lines, right there where those four squares all meet. We're going to curve it around. And it should look like basically a broomstick, I suppose, or a shovel handle. Now, in this case, we've got the horn is in the middle of that, and the bottom portion of the steering wheel actually touches the green stripe at the top of the door. So somewhere in here we have to draw something that looks like a tilted letter U. Like a horseshoe, I guess. Tilted letter U. I'm going to touch that line on the top of the door up because I want my steering wheel to disappear behind it. So then there's the portion of it that's the horn, and it will be directly above this letter U that we just drew, if you caught that rhyme that time. So we'll just pretend like we're drawing through it and pick the line up over here. So we're kind of pretend we're drawing through it, pick that line up, and we're just trying to draw something kind of like a hockey puck or something up there. Okay, so I'm going to bold my lines, curve it over right there where it touches in those intersectional lines, and I'm pretty satisfied with the way that looks at this point. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and refocus just for a moment. And I think that looks pretty good, if you ask me. Let's hit the focus here. Alright, yes, that's really quite good. Okay, so we're getting ready to move on again to our next series of problems, visual issues to deal with. And in this case, this line right here that is in square E, 1, 2, 3, and line 4. Square 4. So we're looking for E, 3, and 4 on our drawing, which is really just a complicated graph if you've not noticed that. Okay, so it would be in this square, and we have to kind of figure out where in this square this begins and it ends down here. Now it seems to me that if I were to go and split my square, which is a habit I have if I could find my red pen, so if I split my square, be a square E3. I split it again. If I do it on here, I should probably do it over here. So square E3. And I will do this lightly so I can erase it later. And you should draw with a light touch also. It makes erasing things much easier. So now I realize that by looking at my picture here that this line that I want to draw is somewhere about half the distance down this curve in this quadrant. So I'm going to put my red pen away and try to figure out where that's at. So I follow this curved line. It's about halfway across this quadrant. And so it's about halfway across this quadrant, about right here. So I'm going to put in a dot, a registration dot, to help me there. Now in this case, it looks like that line is tilted just slightly, and that's good to notice there, and a lot of people never do notice that. So that's going to help me. If this was straight up and down, I can put it over here just a little bit just to give it that tilt. So now I've got my two registration dots I can draw toward, and so I'm going to get out my ruler. I'm going to orient it so it is connecting the two dots, and they are slightly tilted, just like this is also slightly tilted. So here we go. I'm going to draw bold, but you should draw lightly because you may have to erase things. And I'm probably going to have to erase some parts down here as well. So now I can go back and maybe touch up these dots. They're maybe not so necessary now. Get those out of there. And also erase my split line out. And then I can start looking at the picture again to give me more information so that I can go ahead and make some progress on it. So, see, a lot of this is just really figuring out where things go. It's not necessarily anything that is really complicated or difficult. It's simply figuring out where stuff goes and then putting it in the proper place. That's really a great deal of what drawing is all about. Now, so in the next part of this, we're going to try to figure out where this line goes and where this line goes up here. So I like to start with this one up on the very front of the car because it's kind of shaped like something we're familiar with, a shark fin. And it looks like it doesn't come quite right out of the back of the tire, but just a little bit from, so if this were the complete back of the tire, we'd go up around the tire maybe about right here. And I'm going to draw a, it looks like a kind of a backwards lowercase r. I'm going to dot it. And I go up, and once I get above the line on the grid square, I'm going to start curving. In fact, probably could probably could go down here. I think I'm going to move my line. It can't be all the way out here, so it has to be maybe somewhere right here. So there we go. Now I'm going to get my line dotting going. Okay, and that's looking a little bit more like the picture now. And I like that, so I'm going to bold it. And it doesn't come quite out the side of the tire. It comes just a little bit inside that tire. There's just a tiny little bit of the protrusion of the tire in there. So if I had to correct anything, I might just trim this tiniest little piece of my line out of there. There we go. That's probably a good call. Alright. So let me bold my line a bit. And there. Now, let's dust it and see what we've got. Okay. Well, it's starting to really quite accurately resemble the picture that we are drawing from. And so now we've got this line here where the hood latches are at, and we could open that up, I suppose, and see the engine. So maybe we'll simply just do a measurement in this case, and that should give us a pretty good idea where we need to go with this. So if I measure down from this part right here, and then whatever that measurement is, I multiply that times 2. That's where it should be on my car drawing. So I'm measuring down, and it says that it is 1 complete centimeter. So that means by doubling it, which is the size of my drawing, I should come 2 centimeters down from that same spot, which is right here on this drawing. So I'm going to lay my ruler right there. I'm going to measure off 2 centimeters, and I'm going to put a dot right next to it. Now that gives me the true height of that. Now I could also measure up to this portion right here, and that would never hurt. However, we know that it's just above the grid line and it tilts downhill, and so if we simply just go follow this up, and just above the grid line we put a dot here and square G3. Then we should have something that nicely tilts downhill, is at the right spot where it starts, and should end up in so close as to the actual answer that it will be more than enough for this drawing project. So we're going to take our ruler, going to find our 2 dots that we made. We're going to slope it downhill just slightly like that, just like what we see over here. And we're going to hold the ruler down and make our mark. Now I'm going to draw with a heavy touch, but you should draw lightly. Alright, now I'm going to dress up my work as I go along here and kind of erase my dots a bit. And they would probably disappear anyway once I started doing the coloring on this project as well. Okay, so progress is being made. We've got the shark fin here, we've got the tilted line right here, we've done our math so that we got this tilted at almost the exact angle. So I say that's good. So we can move on to one of the more interesting details of this car, and it's these latches that we see right here and here. And so these latches go onto the car. It looks like this latch touches the grid line, and this latch is touching the lower grid line. So in this case, we'll just draw, I like to draw these basically as ovals to start with. And it looks like the oval overlaps the line, but more of it is below than above the line for our hood. So I'm going to, let's see, it's about right in here somewhere. And I'm going to simply just draw a rather large oval that is hugging that grid line. Now I may not make it go all the way down to the next grid line, but I can always make it larger. But I'm going to just make an oval shape right there. And I'm going to try to make a similar oval shape to it down here. And in this case it touches the grid line, and it looks like that's a pretty important aspect of it. And it looks like it's about half the distance in this grid square. So the latch is touching the grid line, but in this grid square, this is about halfway, and this is half of that halfway. So half the distance till I get to the little shark fin. About right here. And about right here. And it will be just slightly tilted, just like its mate. And it will overlap the line where the hood is at, and the bottom of it will just barely touch the grid line, just like this one is touching the grid line, but on the right hand side. Okay, so we've got our latches in the right place. Now the way I will need to do some very careful erasing in this case to not erase everything I've just drawn, and I happen to just have a small eraser for just such a purpose. So I'm going to trim that out of there. I'm going to do the same thing here. And then I'm going to resharpen my pencil, because this is work that will require kind of a pointy working tip to the pencil. Alright, that's much better. So now all this really is just two stripes, and these springs, they kind of look like a bug almost. So what I'm going to do here is tighten up my oval. Maybe erase portions of it that are hanging off funny there. Same thing over here. Tighten up the oval. A little bit more dark mark. And I'm going to put a little stripe in the middle of it. And it will be above and below the line where our hood used to be. So just slightly above, just slightly below. Same thing over here. Just slightly above, just slightly below. Okay, now there is a spring, is what these little, they look like they're the antennas on bugs, but it's a spring. So we'll simply just kind of barely just get that spring just kind of stuck out there just a little bit. Just barely a little bit, just sticking out there like almost like antennas on a bug. Same thing here. That spring should be latching that hood down so it hopefully doesn't come open when we are trying to drive this thing. Alright, so I might go back and just do a little touch-up work. And although it seems like I may be going fast, and I don't know if I am or not, but I'm more interested in getting a good drawing than I am in getting done fast. I know some people want to get done fast. I want to get done good, and I want you all to get done good also. Alright, so progress is really being made here, and we've just in this session so far we've been able to draw in the steering wheel and the front portion of all this, and so we're going to move on now to these parts of our suspension down here. They're designed basically, I believe, to keep your tires straight up and down when you go through curves. And so I believe the technical term is a sway bar. But whatever, it is definitely a part of the suspension. And so we're going to need to use some lazy C's and a lazy S in order to make these things, and of course our trusty ruler. Now we have to figure out where they start at first, and this item right here is basically where they originate at, and that would be in square D4. And so we come down to square D4, and that's right here, and it looks like this is almost up against the grid line here in D4, but not quite. So we'll just draw our piece of our device here that holds our, what we will call our sway bars, and it kind of is shaped a little bit like a cup, kind of like this. So that's how I'm going to put it in there. And I'm going to, while I'm doing this, I'm going to figure out where the other one goes, and it's in square E4, and it's kind of close to that line too. So here's squares E, and here's E4, and it looks like it's probably over in here. It's not quite to the grid line, but it's not underneath the hood either, so I'm going to put it about right here. And we want these to be about the same size. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right spot. Okay. Alright. Now, it's important too that we have to review some things. See, we want the bottom of the tire to be lower than this. If you've already got the bottom of your car kind of riding along down on this grid line here, you're going to have some problems. You need to fix that. Okay, so we've got our devices, the mechanical gizmos that hold our sway bars, as we're calling them, onto the car. There is also a circle in here, but we're going to come back to that. Well, no, maybe not. We'll do it right now. So I'm going to freehand a circle in the middle of that. I'm going to do the same thing up here. Okay. Now we're going to start with the ones that are in the back. I think they're a little bit easier to draw. These longer ones in the front actually slant up and downhill just slightly. So in this instance we're going to draw a lazy S and a lazy C. And I think maybe we'll just use the dotted line technique. And if you look on there, this is pretty much a lazy S. And this is pretty much a lazy S and reverse lazy C. So we're going to, about as high as that bolt is right there, we're going to start by, and this, as you can see, intrudes into this portion of the car a little bit. So I'm going to draw a lazy S that goes up a bit, touches the bottom of the car. Now I have to do the same thing in reverse, and I want it to really match this if I can make that happen. So a lazy S, a reverse lazy S in this case. Okay, that's pretty close. Okay, so this is some really tricky drawing here. I'm going to clean it up a little bit so I can see precisely what I'm looking at. That means erasing a little bit of the bottom of the car. Okay, I say this is really pretty close. And so let's get it. Well, see, this doesn't quite match this curve right here, so I'm sweating the detail. But that's what you do when you want it to look good. Okay, so here we go. Now, where's my little dust brush? Now I'm going to draw a reverse lazy C that's not quite as tall as these. I'm going to go back. It looks to me like the grid line, the inside of our reverse lazy C actually touches the grid line. So if you started right here and curved it back till it touched that grid line, and then continued again like this, we should have that portion of the undercarriage of the suspension of this car pretty well drawn in there. Okay, now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. We want to use our ruler, and I like to start at the top and work my way downward, because each time I draw a line then I can see what I just drew. If I started at the bottom and did that, I'd draw a line and then I'd cover it up, and it would be kind of a mystery to me what I was drawing. Now the way I see this, it goes perfectly straight and horizontal, straight level. So we're going to try to duplicate that with our ruler and our pencil. So we find the top of our sway bar there, the top of the lazy S that we drew. We're going to hold our ruler down firmly, and we're going to strike a line that disappears behind the big tire on the rear of the car. Then we're going to carefully slide it down to the next portion, the top of the lazy C. Accuracy is important when we're drawing mechanical objects. Hold it down firmly. It should be parallel to the bottom of the paper, parallel to the line we just made above it. Okay, now same thing again. Now we're at the bottom of the lazy C, and we want to go straight sidewards, parallel to all the other lines that we have just drawn, horizontal. And then we'll do one more, and this is the bottom of the lazy S that's on the bottom of the sway bar. We'll hold it down firmly. We're going to find the bottom of the lazy S, and we're going to draw our mark. Okay. And then We pull that away, and it looks like all we got to do is maybe touch up a little bit of some erasing in there. Maybe dress that marking up there a bit. And with my high-tech tiny eraser that you may or may not have available to you, erase that little portion of the body, the underbody of the car out of there. Same down here. I'm going to clean that up a bit. It's kind of messing with me. Alright. So, there we go. We've got that done on the back side of our automobile. And so, I always save the front one because it's longer and requires a little bit more ruler work. And is also, it gets wider as it goes to the front. So if we were to carefully look at this, you would notice that as the top portion of it runs uphill just slightly, and it's over the top of the body of the car. This is the bottom of the car. That's what this line right here is the bottom of the car. And then the other one forks down slightly downhill. So this front one is long, and it spreads out a bit as it approaches the front tire. So we simply have to do the same thing we did right here, but in reverse right here. And so I'm going to start with my Lazy S, and it's about the thickness of this bolt. So we'll come over here and we'll start with our Lazy S, and it will come up and it will touch the bottom of the car, just like it shows that it does right here. See, it intrudes into the bottom of that car a bit. So the Lazy S. And then we're going to do the same thing in reverse on the bottom of it. Alright. Okay. Now you want them to kind of really match each other if you can get that to happen. Sometimes it's a struggle. But if you are a person that is really serious about your drawing, then it's not a burden. It's just a struggle. Now we're going to do the same thing we did over here, but where Lazy C this time will actually be shaped like a C instead of a reverse of that. So, make sure you just keep manipulating it until you get just the right shape. Same here, same here. Alright, now, so that's looking pretty good from what I can see. So I'm going to take my fancy eraser here and erase this material that's right in there, because I would not be able to see that. It covers it up, and so it would be obscured. There we go. Now, we're going to use our ruler the same way we did back here, and we're simply going to draw our lines slightly tilted uphill. I'm going to erase this. I don't know what it really is, but I'm erasing it. Okay, so we take our ruler, we're going to find the top of the Lazy S, and we're going to make this one kind of run uphill a bit. In fact, let's try this. We'll put our first dot, since we want this to run slightly uphill, and we have to be able to see the bottom of the car. So we're going to put a dot about right here. About right there is probably a good place to put one, right next to that tire. And that's where we can run this line slightly uphill. So we're going to start at the top of the Lazy S, we're going to angle it toward the dot, and then we're going to draw our line. Now this will be the top of that piece of metal. That's part of the suspension. Then we'll slide it down just a bit, and we're going to find the top of the Lazy C. And we're going to make a parallel line. So we find the top of the Lazy C, and it's kind of hard to see it sometimes because it's touching the bottom of the car. Okay, now this is a skinny line. It needs to be parallel to the one we just drew. It needs to run slightly uphill until it hits the tire, and then it disappears behind the tire. Should look something like that. Now I am going to move on, and we're going to do the bottom of this as well, but it is starting to shape up like what we see up here, which is the whole goal of making this particular drawing. So let's try to do the same thing, but this time it's going to slope slightly downhill so that we can see the bottom of the car. So I find the bottom of my lazy C, hold it in place, and I just strike the line so that it disappears behind the front tire. And then I see what I've done, and one more time, and this I'm going to bold that line. It's kind of messing with me. I really can't see it very well. And if I can't see it, somebody else that can't either. Okay, we'll do this one more time, and we'll find the bottom of the lazy S. We want our line to be parallel, because we got to really get a colored pencil in between there, so you don't want these things so skinny that you can't put a colored pencil in there and color with it. Okay, this looks pretty good. We're going to start right here and parallel to the line we just drew a moment ago, and it can't be lower than the tire, right? So and this will run off of the picture just slightly, or it will disappear behind the front tire, and that is starting to look pretty good, I think. Now that allows us to start looking at our car here and addressing where we might need to continue at. And in this case, I'm going to say probably the rims are a good place to begin. So we're going to start up here with this rim. Now, we're not going to draw all these spokes, and you can draw any rim you want. However, I've got some ideas for rims that seem to work pretty good for most students and have been successful over the years. And so this one is an old school quad mag rim. And I'm going to draw it like this from the edges of the circles, and we're just going to draw, it's almost like a slice of pizza, so we're drawing a tilted line downward. Same thing from here, downward, until it hits the edge of the metal part of our rim. This outer circle is the rubber portion of the tire. Now we want to reproduce that vertically, so on the top here. So if we got it on the bottom, it looks like it's about right here. And we're simply just going to try to draw the mirror image of what we did down here. And it's pretty close, I can tell just by looking at it. Maybe this needs to be slightly wider to match its partner up there. And next, we'll simply do the same thing but sideways. And in this case, it will be about this wide, so we're going to... And we'll do the same thing over here. So we want each piece of this, it looks like pizza with the end bit off. We want each piece of this to be about the same size. And it looks much more visually attractive that way. And I'll hold that. And we've got the last one to do over here on this side. Same thing right here. Now, what we've got is the 4 metal mags in our tires, or our rims. And they call them a mag because, you know, they're made out of magnesium and stuff like that, but they call it a quad mag because there's 4 of them. And each one of these has a lug nut. It's the bolt that holds the tire on. So we'll try to put these right in the same orientation all the way around so they don't look awkward. And the same thing here. So some people say it's a pepperoni rim or a pizza rim, and so they draw 4 slices of pizza and then 4 slices of pepperoni. Whatever helps you draw it better. But this is the easiest rim that I know how to show people how to draw that actually looks good, like a custom car rim. So the one that we've got on the back tire is simply going to be a duplication of this rim, just larger, right? And so we're going to go back to the back tire and do that one next, and we are approaching a phase of this drawing where we can start thinking about decorations, perhaps in the next session. So let's check this out. With it, well, that's the end of the session anyway. and probably not a moment too soon, because it will be good to review what we've done here in our next session. So in just one session, we've brought this car almost to its completion as far as doing the drawing portion of it goes. We did the steering wheel, we did the interior lines on the hood, we did the sway bars, both the rear and the front ones, and actually completed the rim and the latches as well. So that's a successful use of our class time, and so we will continue on, and we will do the rear tire in the next session, and then we'll start putting some decorations on our car after we clean it up a bit. Alright, well, that's been a good session. I will see you next time.